Hi guys, welcome back to DeFi Daily. Today we're going to talk about Three Arrows Capital that is facing bankruptcy. And the risk is a cascade, so a trigger effect, a chain effect that will destroy, or at least it's putting at risk, many other companies that are involved to the DeFi space and crypto space. What I want to tell you today is what's going on and what are the players that are involved, and most of all, what are the kind of behaviors that has been used by Three Arrows Capital in order to reach this kind of level of degen situation, because what we are facing right now is literally a really dangerous situation. And these kind of behaviors are something that it's not just limited to what we are seeing to Three Arrows Capital, but this is something that we have seen also from other players, and I will tell you which of them. And remember guys, if you enjoy this content, remember to leave a big thumbs up, drop a comment, and if you're new to the channel, also subscribe. Also remember that this channel is about educational content and nothing has to be intended as financial advice. If you want to invest in anything, that's great, but do always your own research first. Okay guys, let's start immediately. So this is the website of Three Arrows Capital. The reason why it is interesting is because, first of all, on select investments, you can find the different players and investments that has been done by this fund. The reason why it is interesting to check this kind of list is because it helps you to understand what are the different kind of assets that are involved. Because, for example, if the fund has some kind of exposure, for example, to Avalanche, and they are owning some kind of AVAX or anything connected, in case of bankruptcy, in case they have to be liquid, they will sell their assets, and this can provoke also a downside into the price. Not to mention that some of these players can suffer some consequences related due to the behaviors that has been used by Three Arrows Capital that I will explain to you in a moment. But what are the other players that are involved into this crisis? Because in this case, we are talking about layer ones, as you can see here, decentralized finance protocols, equity funds, and so on. But the reality is that this kind of fund was involved with many other protocols, DeFi protocols, and also CeFi protocol. Like, for example, we know that Voyager was quite affected by what happened with Three Arrows Capital, because they had something like $600 million of exposure to Three Arrows Capital. And in order to solve that situation, they have been able to secure a loan with Alameda, and they have been able to receive something like 15,000 of Bitcoin as from this news, plus 200 million in cash USDC backed, in order to be able to keep going with their activities. In any case, remember that even if Voyager Digital has been able to secure this kind of funds, the reality is that they are still quite suffering, because as you can see also from this news, Crypto Broker Voyager Digital lowers daily withdrawal. The reason why is quite simple. They are having problems in terms of liquidity, and in order to avoid a bank run and to literally drain all the resources or the liquidity they have right now, they are trying to lower or creating some kind of limit in order to have still liquidity to complete all the different operations that they are having right now. Talking about if there are some other players that are involved into this crisis, it is still unclear, because we don't know all the connection that are starting with Three Arrows Capital, not to mention that the cascade effect, it is still possible, because let's say that, for example, Voyager Digital, it is suffering, it is locking, it is blocking something, and some other players, it is needing that kind of funds. If Voyager Digital is blocking them, the cascade effect can cause other companies to fail or to face some kind of difficulty. For example, we can mention what happened with BlockFi, that it is been working with FTX in order to secure a 250 million of credit facility in order to keep going and protect their operations. Other players has been said that, for example, here you can find Defiance, Avalanche, DYDX, and so on. Other protocols, other companies that are saying, guys, we are not involved in it, and the exposure that we had to Three Arrows Capital were quite limited or not existent. The reality is that we are in a phase that is still too early to say anything. We don't know what are all the players that are involved, so don't just trust this news. These news are communication. Communication should be aimed to keep calm, to help the users to still trust the different companies. But don't be surprised if tomorrow some other news came out saying that some other player is facing bankruptcy or they are suffering a liquidity crisis or whatever it is. Going to the reasons why everything happened and why it has been possible to see so big a fund, because we are talking about Three Arrows Capital that was at a peak managing something like $18 billion, so quite a lot of money. But how it was possible for this big player to fail? There are many speculations. I want to share some of them. Obviously, still remember that we are still talking about speculation. What we know is that with any probability they have been affected by what happened with Terra, Luna UST, so that crashed because they had some exposure to this kind of assets. On the other side, also the downside that has been produced by UST and so on in the whole market has lowered drastically the amount of resources that they have. On the other side, they have also some kind of a leverage position, and that's something that is a certainty. For example, I was sharing with you the other day talking about their wallet on Aave that was having something like 250 million of ETH that was collateralizing a loan, and that kind of loan was at risk of being liquidated. And as you can imagine, the moment when it will be liquidated, and it has been at least partially liquidated, it is causing for them a big loss. And that's something that it is documented even if we don't have any official declaration by the Three Arrows Capital. There are other speculations that are saying, for example, I'm reporting this from the DeFi Edge that is talking about an insider that is sharing some thoughts or at least some habits from Three Arrows Capital and their relationship with them. And what is emerging and what is the core point, it is something that is quite scary, because this company, so this protocol that is anonymous because they didn't want to release and to reveal their names, what they were doing is collecting funds from Three Arrows Capital and after that giving them back to Three Arrows Capital in order to produce some kind of yield. Because what they were promising, Three Arrows Capital were promising, is that we can give you something like 8%, if I'm not wrong. Yes, according to this thread, it is 8% APR. If you give us these funds, we will produce for you this kind of yield and you will be happy. And this situation was so good that at a certain point, they were not only leaving to Three Arrows Capital the money that they have just received from them, the round of investment, but also part of the treasury in order to produce additional yield on top of it. The reason why they were doing it instead of just keeping the funds into their treasury is because just keeping them locked without any use case, without any kind of yield producing, it is a pity, because in a market that is growing, not producing yield could be something that is detrimental for the future. Most of all, at that point, they weren't needing money. They still had enough money to complete all the different operations. The funds that were into the treasury were funds that, or also the funds that has been collected through Three Arrows Capitals, were funds that were simply for the future. Something that was needed, but not in that moment. So they didn't need the liquidity in that moment. So that's the reason why they were giving this liquidity to Three Arrows Capital in order to produce more yield. And it appears that it's not an isolated case, because other founders contacted the DeFi Edge saying the same story, telling the same story, or at least this is what it looked like. Another speculation is coming from 8 Capital, this 8 Blocks Capital, and from this tweet you can see that it appears another problem. Three Arrows Capital was, yes, managing funds for also other companies, And the point is that in the moment when they were receiving their margin call, the margin call is simply the point where you are at least being liquidated. When the protocol is saying to you, guys, you need to repay your debt, otherwise we will have to liquidate your position. And what they were doing is simply bringing the funds from, in this case, 8Blocks Capital, using their funds in order to repay their own margin call, the margin call from Three Arrows Capital. So Three Arrows Capital was using funds from their customers in order to repay their own debt. As you can see in a situation like this one, what is happening is that it is triggering a chain effect where all the different customers that were involved with Three Arrows Capital are at risk to not having their own treasury, to losing their own treasury, to don't have enough liquidity to complete the different operations. And that's something that has happened exactly, for example, with Voyager. If you want to know more about this story, I will share also into the description below some other thread. For example, these are coming from Fatman, and he is talking about the liquidation and so on. Or in this case, he is mentioning that the CEO of Three Arrows Capital were using the funds from the customer in order to borrow some money in order to buy a yacht. In this case, we were talking about something like 50 million. That's just another story. If you're curious to know more, I will leave also the link of it in the description below. If you want to know more also about what are the possible implications from this situation, what we need to know is that all the investments that were made by Three Arrows Capital are this one. What does it mean? It means that they are having, or it is possible that they have some token from different kind of projects. And the main project should be this one. So we can expect that in the case, if they need to liquidate their assets, they can dump into the market this token. So pay attention, because it is possible to see a downtrend, specifically into these tokens here. And the same, it has been said by Kyber Network, that is one of the protocol that was working with Three Arrows Capital. Even if in this case they are saying that the exposure should be not so significant, so to stay calm, because they don't expect any kind of major downside. Even if they don't deny that it's possible that Three Arrows Capital is still having some token from them, and it is possible for them to see it dumping into the market. There are other consequences. There are many of them, because many news are coming out every day. In this case, for example, we are having Finblox that is having some difficulties relating due to the Three Arrows Capital crisis. Here you can find some details about their announcement. They are stopping withdrawals, they are stopping also rewards and so on, or at least they are not stopping withdrawals, but they are reducing the amount of withdrawal that you can complete in a single operation or a single amount of time. So as you can understand, the situation is quite delicate, and we are still at the beginning, unfortunately, because in the last week we have seen a market that was slightly and slowly recovering, or at least reaching again some kind of level of support. But the point is that in the moment when the market will go down again, the crisis could go even farther, because in that moment other protocols, other companies that has been affected maybe by this situation cannot be able anymore to support their situation, and in that moment maybe they should be forced to sell, and as you can imagine, triggering a chain effect of selling pressure can produce even lower prices. So be aware that the worst scenario is still there. Another black swan event is still possible, so it's not true that we have reached the bottom. Maybe yes, but maybe also it is something that it will come into the future. So guys, pay attention to this situation, because it is still really delicate and can evolve any moment soon, and unfortunately not only in a positive way. So remember it. Guys, let me know what you think about the behaviors of Arrows Capital. And as I want to just show you here, unfortunately, these kind of behaviors are not only related to Three Arrows Capital. Here we are talking about Babel, that is another protocol, another company that was also using some kind of behaviors that are not so noble, or at least not so good, or they are possible to put at risk the future and the money from the users that were using the protocol and so on. So maybe we'll talk about also this other company another time. What I want to just tell you, guys, pay attention, because right now any kind of scenario is still possible and can literally affect the whole industry. So guys, I hope that this video helped you to better understand what's going on into this market and what we can expect into the future. And unfortunately, it's not so bright, at least not yet. So pay attention, let me know what you think about the whole story. Remember, if you're new to the channel, subscribe, and if you enjoy this content, remember to leave a big thumbs up and drop a comment. Guys, thank you for following me, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye guys.